In parts of the southern United States, it's pretty normal for someone to walk out into their yard in the morning, take a few steps through the grass, and suddenly jump back because something just hissed right under their feet. This isn't rare. It's not a one-off thing. It happens all the time. Every year, thousands of venomous snake bites are reported across the U.S., and most of them don't happen out in the wild. They happen right next to where people live, on farms, near water, along paths people use every day. And here's the weird part. In those same places, something else is already there. Something that attacks anything that can't get away fast enough, doesn't act alone, but in huge numbers, and can overwhelm animals much bigger than itself. It's not machines, not traps, not chemicals. It's fire ants. They showed up in the US decades ago, and since then, they've spread across massive parts of the South. At some point, these two systems started overlapping. Ants operate like a swarm, thousands of individuals acting like one unit. Snakes are the opposite. They're solitary. They rely on speed, stealth, and timing. When those two meet, the result isn't always obvious. Sometimes it ends with ants literally covering a snake and attacking all at once. From the outside, it almost looks like a solution. One species starts putting pressure on another without any human involvement. The only question is, does it actually work like that? The southern US is one of those places where everything lines up. Warm weather most of the year, barely any real winter in some areas, and in many regions, high humidity. At the same time, development keeps expanding. New neighborhoods, roads, farms. There's no clear line between wild and human space. It's all mixed together. Houses, drainage systems, fields, ponds. They overlap with the same environments where snakes live, so contact becomes unavoidable. Snakes aren't coming after people. They're just using the same environment. They hide under boards, rocks, in tall grass, inside drainage pipes, near water. And as more areas get built out, people run into them more often. In states like Texas, Florida, and Louisiana, this is just part of everyday life. It's not a disaster in the dramatic sense. Nobody's saying snakes are taking over, but the risk is always there. The number of bites stays pretty consistent year after year. That tells you something. The situation isn't really changing. People and snakes are just continuing to live side by side. And if you look at how most bites actually happen, it's not what people expect. It's rarely an attack. Most of the time, someone steps too close, doesn't see the snake, reaches into the wrong place, or tries to move something. Rattlesnakes, cottonmouths, copperheads, all they use venom as defense, not to hunt people. But that's enough. Even one bite is a serious medical situation. And when you're talking thousands of cases every year, it becomes a constant pressure, especially in rural areas where getting to a hospital can take time. And snakes aren't spread evenly either. There are hotspots, places where conditions are perfect, shelter, food, and the right climate. That's where the risk is highest. People have been trying to deal with this for decades. The most obvious approach is just killing snakes, but that doesn't really solve anything long-term. Populations bounce back quickly. New snakes move in from nearby areas. Traps only work in small areas and need constant maintenance. Fencing can help in specific spots, but not across large regions. Chemical control is rarely used because it affects everything, not just snakes. So it turns into a loop. The problem is there, people try to manage it, but there's no solution that works across the whole system. And that's where the second factor comes in. Something nobody introduced as a solution, but something that's already affecting the environment. Fire ants. They were brought into the US in the early 20th century and have since spread across huge areas in the South. Now they're just part of the landscape. A single colony can have hundreds of thousands of ants, and in some places, the density is so high that they basically cover the ground. You can walk through a field and be surrounded by dozens of colonies without even noticing. They don't really choose targets. Their rule is simple: attack anything that can't get away fast enough. That could be an insect, a bird, a lizard, or a mammal. Movement, vibration, even scent can trigger a response. Within seconds, hundreds of ants can be on the target, and the way they attack is very different from most other species. They don't act one by one. They swarm immediately. They latch on and start biting at the same time. Each bite comes with venom, causing pain and tissue damage. But the key thing is, they don't stop. They hold on. They keep attacking. More ants keep coming. And if the animal can't get away quickly, it ends up under constant pressure. For small animals, that often means death. For larger ones, it means stress and a desperate attempt to escape. So when these ants live in the same environment as venomous snakes, you get an overlap of two very different systems. Snakes rely on speed, camouflage, and quick escape. Ants rely on numbers and instant aggression. Most of the time, adult snakes avoid them, but there are moments when that doesn't work. The most vulnerable stage is right after birth. Young snakes are slow, weak, and often exposed. Another critical moment is shedding. During that time, snakes are less mobile and slower to react, and those are exactly the moments when ants can attack. Observations show that fire ants can kill baby snakes or cause serious damage. And this isn't some rare coincidence. It happens over and over again in areas with high ant density. So the pressure hits snakes at their weakest stage, and that stage determines how many actually survive to adulthood. This leads to a simple idea. If enough young snakes die early, the overall population should drop, especially if this keeps happening across large areas. And that's where it starts to look like a built-in solution. Fire ants are already there. They act on their own. They hit snakes when they're most vulnerable, and they do it in large numbers. If you only look at that part, it feels like the system is already fixing itself. Like nature has created its own control mechanism without any human involvement. But the real question is, does it actually work that way, or is something else going on underneath? At first, it all sounds pretty logical. Fire ants operate right where humans have no control, down at ground level, everywhere. You don't have to introduce them or maintain anything. They're already there. Their colonies are packed so tightly that almost any area where snakes can live is already occupied. In some places, there are only a few yards between mounds. It's not just scattered spots. It's basically a network covering the entire landscape. That means the pressure on snakes is constant. Any movement, anything showing up in that space, and the reaction starts immediately. And since young snakes take the biggest hit, it seems simple. If you wipe them out early, the total population should drop over time. You can think of it like a filter. Out of a large number of newborns, only some make it to adulthood. If that filter gets harsher, the final number should go down. So in that sense, ants start to look like an automatic system cutting snake populations at their weakest stage. And here's what makes it convincing. Ants don't hunt like typical predators. They don't track targets or make decisions. There's no goal like kill a snake. They just react to signals: movement, vibration, heat, scent. A few ants show up, then dozens, then hundreds. And at that point, it's over. A snake can freeze. That works against most threats, but not against ants. All it takes is being close to a colony or moving through an active zone. It doesn't matter if you're visible. Heat and scent are enough. And when you look at how dense these colonies are in some areas, it becomes clear there are almost no safe gaps. Even if one group of baby snakes avoids contact in one spot, the chances of running into ants somewhere else are still high. And not just once, again and again. There's also another argument that seems solid at first. Fire ants have been around for decades. They've gone through climate changes, urban growth, agriculture, and they're still here. But if they were actually putting serious pressure on snake populations, you'd expect to see a clear effect by now. Not total disappearance, but at least a noticeable drop. Because the logic is simple. If a limiting factor is constant, widespread, and long-term, the effect should build up over time. And this is where things start to break. Even though fire ants are everywhere, snakes haven't disappeared. They're still found in the same states, in the same environments. People still run into them in their yards, on farms, near water. Snake bites still happen every year at roughly the same scale. That tells you something important. Either the ants don't have that much impact, or something else is balancing it out. And to understand that, you have to zoom out. Not just ants versus snakes, but the whole system. First, ants don't target snakes specifically. They don't specialize. They attack whatever they can. Bird nests, lizards, insects, small mammals, all of them get hit the same way. There are documented cases where ants destroy bird nests, attack newborn animals that can't escape, or seriously damage other species. So the pressure isn't focused. It hits the entire ecosystem, and that changes the rules. When pressure is applied in every direction, it shifts the balance. Some species decline, others lose food sources, behaviors change. But it doesn't mean things move in a direction that helps people. Second, there are adult snakes. Most of the impact from ants hits the young. Adult snakes, in most cases, just move away. They're faster, stronger, and can leave before the situation becomes dangerous. That means a large part of the population isn't affected at all. Snakes keep living, hunting, and reproducing. And even if some young snakes die, the rest make up for it. Many species reproduce enough to cover those losses. Third, space is enormous. The southern US is huge, and conditions vary. Even with high ant density, coverage isn't perfectly uniform. There are drier areas, different soils, different vegetation. There are places where ants are less dominant, and that's enough for part of the snake population to survive. On top of that, snakes adapt. They can change behavior, where they hide, when they move, how they use space. Even small changes can reduce contact with ants. And at that point, it becomes clear. The original logic only works partially. Yes, ants do kill some snakes. Yes, they create pressure. But it's not enough to change the system overall. Instead of a solution, you get something else. One invasive species just adds another layer to an already complex system. And you can see that beyond snakes too. Fire ants affect people directly. Millions of stings every year. Most are just painful, but some lead to serious allergic reactions. They damage crops, interfere with equipment, affect electrical systems. In some areas, people deal with them daily. So you end up with a strange situation. There are snakes, which already pose a risk. There are ants, which seem like they should reduce that risk. But instead, you get a second problem, bigger and harder to control. What looked like a simple, almost automatic solution turns out to be part of a much more unstable system. Fire ants don't solve the snake problem, they just add another one. And there's one more thing people usually don't think about when they imagine ants as some kind of natural fix. It's how fast they reshape the environment around them. Fire ants don't just live in an area, they actively change it. Their colonies move, expand, and sometimes merge into larger structures. In some regions, they form what are called super colonies, where the whole area functions like a single system. That matters because this kind of structure behaves differently. The pressure isn't local anymore, it's spread out. If conditions get worse in one spot, ants quickly move into nearby areas. If there's a new source of activity or food, the response can cover a large space almost instantly. That makes the system both more stable and more aggressive at the same time. And here's the side effect. When one species dominates like that, it pushes out other insects. That shifts the entire chain of interactions. Fewer insects can affect plant pollination. Changes in other populations affect food availability for birds and small animals. So the ecosystem doesn't just change in one place, it shifts across multiple levels. And that brings it back to the main idea. If ants really worked as a tool against snakes, their impact would be focused. But in reality, it isn't. They don't create balance, they create pressure. And that pressure spreads in every direction. So ants stop looking like a solution. Snakes don't disappear. Ants add more pressure. The system doesn't get simpler, it gets more complicated. And that's what makes the whole idea unstable. There's no control point, no way to stop or guide the process. It just keeps going, and the consequences spread further than expected. So using fire ants against venomous snakes might sound powerful, but in reality, it's a pretty questionable solution.